Welcome, everyone. My name is Ramses. I am community manager at Logseq. Today it's Wednesday, so it's time again for Workflow Wednesday. Today it's a little bit different because I will be hosting an office hours. What is an office hours? Well, if you're American, you will probably know what it is. If you're a non-native speaker like me, question and answers is probably a more familiar term. So when you signed up for this session, I asked you, what is your top challenge with Logseq? I got many messages from people ranging from anywhere, complete beginners to super advanced users, like I would say power users. And overwhelmingly, people ask to dive deeper into queries. So it seems like many people are aware of queries, but don't really know how to use them. So today, I want to dive into the basics of queries. For that, we'll have to touch very briefly on two fundamental principles of Logseq. So if you're a power user, sorry, I will need to quickly dive into the principles of Logseq. And then we'll actually start building live processes, because queries, in a very simplified way, I would describe as a saved search. So just like you have the linked references at the bottom of a page, so you can basically create your own collections of blocks and links using queries. And if you are in any way familiar with Boolean search, if you are quite an advanced Google user, so you know how to search using Google, using arguments to leave out results, or to make certain results a must, that like certain keywords must be included in the search term. That is the basic idea of queries. So you're searching your notes, looking for any block or collection of blocks that match those results. So that is the simplified explanation. Today, we'll be diving much deeper into that. We'll do live coding, like I said. And I say coding because as if you've already looked at queries, it looks basically like code, but it looks more complex than it actually is. So that is what I hope you will take away from today's session. I will share my screen so you get an idea of what's in store today. Just a thumbs up. Can you see my screen? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So today we'll have a look at the fundamentals of Logseq. I would say blocks and branches and links. Those are the most important parts you need to start working with queries. And then we'll dive into queries. We'll have a look at the different filters. So again, those are like logic you can apply to your search terms, but we'll dive into those. And then I have a heading here for demo data, because I have a few ideas based on your input, what we will be building. So what I have in mind is journaling. I want to show a very quick example of how you can basically drill down into your journal entries. Obviously, that can translate to anything. That can translate to meeting notes. That can translate to basically anything that you want to revisit over time. So time will be an important component in that. And then we'll also have a look if there's time left at task management. But I've demoed task management a few times in the past, so I want to show this first. Obviously, these are simplified examples that I will be working with, but I hope that by showing the basic building blocks of queries, you'll be able to progressively build more complex queries. And I will also show my process of how I go from very simple, so very few arguments, to progressively more specific, to pinpoint exactly the data or the nodes that I want to retrieve using a query. And along the way, we'll dive into your questions. So definitely put your questions in the chat, and I will be stopping at certain points in the session to answer them. So let's get started with the fundamentals of Logseq. So if you're new to Logseq, if you're new to outliners, this tool can really confuse you. It's what I will tell here is what I see people miss the most. So when I talk to people and Logseq doesn't really click for them, these are the main issues, I would say. And they are deceptively simple, but if you don't use, if you don't think in blocks and branches, and if you don't use links, that will get you in trouble down the line, because then it will be more difficult to find your notes back. And it will be more difficult to basically build processes based on your notes. Let's get started with blocks and branches, and then we'll go very quickly through this because I've explained this several times. So I have an onboarding event that I can link to later where I go very deeply into this. But for now, just remember that Logseq is an outliner. So an outliner is basically what you see here. You have bullets and they are progressively nested. So this, in outliner speak, what I've selected here is a branch. And it's a branch that is part of this branch. It's a bigger branch. So Office Hours 2 building processes with queries. So personally, I love outlines because it helps me to group information, but not have to use different pages for that. So in, for example, Evernote, or basically any other tool that has the page as the main unit of information, I notice that I have to do a lot of context switching. So I have to go to different pages. The beauty with an outline is, as you can see here, I can click into a block and filter out the noise. So that is what I really like about an outliner. If you're familiar with mind maps and outliners are basically the same thing, just the visual representation is different. So the best way to think of an outliner is to think as it as a tree. So your whole graph is basically the tree, and then any page or any branch of blocks is basically a branch on the tree, and then the individual bullets are the leaves. So as I've written here, leaves is the individual bullets. In Logseq, these are called blocks. So these bullets are blocks. And then you have branches, and a branch is nothing more than a collection of nested blocks. So this is a branch, this is a branch, this is a branch. This is not a branch because why not? It doesn't have any child blocks. If I hit tab on my keyboard, this suddenly is a branch with only 2 blocks in them. So those are the basics. In Logseq, everything is a block. So every bullet is a block. The smallest unit of knowledge is the block. And in other apps, the smallest unit of information is the page. There are some hybrid solutions like Obsidian. So in Obsidian, you can link to individual paragraphs. So in a sense, the paragraph in Obsidian is the smallest unit of information. But it doesn't have this other dimension called indentation as Logseq has, or Rome has for that matter. So as I already pointed out, blocks can be combined in branches or on pages, and these are best compared to folders in other apps. So if you look at this, this looks like a page, but in reality, it's a collection of pages, because if you would regard every block as a separate page, or every branch as a page, you start to see that that information in an outliner like Logseq is way more atomic. So you can fit way more information on the screen, and by using collapsing and expanding, you can hide information. Or clicking into a bullet, you can also hide information. So how do you associate information in Logseq is by indenting blocks. So using the tab key like this, you create relationships, and these are called parent-child relationships. So again, this block that I've selected now is the parent of all these blocks underneath. And I've here created a little visual. Let's make this bigger. Oh, doesn't always render nicely. So block A in this case is only a parent because it's the top block. Then block B is a child block. It doesn't have any other blocks underneath, so it's not a parent. But block C is both a parent and a child. So block C is the child block of block A, but block C is the parent block of block D. So I hope that makes sense. So block C is the child of block A, and block C is the parent of block D. That's all right. Sibling blocks, not really important for queries, but blocks C and B, B and C are sibling blocks. So they are on the same level. There's no relationship between them. So even though I call them sibling blocks, there's no real relationship between them. So if you would use this in a query, like parent block A can communicate with C and D, but block B cannot communicate with C. So because they're on the same level. I hope this doesn't confuse too much, because we'll dive into examples that will make it way, way clearer. Links are another important fundamental, because just using, indentation and stuff, fine to capture notes, fine to create a very lightweight structure for your notes. But then the question arises, as your notes database grows, how will you be able to find back your notes? Links are the answer. So links with square brackets around them point to pages. So if you've been using Logseq for longer than an hour, probably you know about square bracket links. Wiki links they are also called. The simplest way they work is through bidirectional links. So in Logseq, when you create a link and it points to a page, on that page, it will also link back to all the instances you link to that page. So what does it look like? I will open the bidirectional links page in the sidebar, and then you see the linked reference, and you see the block appear here where I have linked to this page. So that is basically the most simple way to use links as an entry point into your notes. Many people stop here, so they just click from link to link. When they want to gather notes, they just link through their graph, click through their graph based on the links, and then they use it that way. We're going to take it a step further, because we are going to use links as search terms for queries. So very neat what links enable us to do. Obviously, once you get deeper into Logseq queries, you'll see that links are not the only way to search for your notes. You can also just put in text, and you can basically search for text patterns. That is outside the scope of this session, because we're keeping it to simple queries. All right. So that's for the fundamentals of Logseq. We'll now be diving into queries. So I want to show a few things that I should have written down. Let's see. So this is docs.logseq.com, which is our official documentation. It's a work in progress, but I will be putting some links for you to check out. So I'm going to link to this page, which basically explains why indentation matters if what I just explained flew over your head. And then let's see. My linking matters, I also want to link to. So I have a few. Let's see. And what else? Okay. So let's have a look at queries. And here down, you see advanced Logseq, and there's the queries page. This page needs a lot of work, I know, but this is a good starting point to get an overview of what's possible. So we'll put this link in the chat, and let's just run through the most important filters. So what is a filter? A filter is, simply said, logic. So if you are familiar with Boolean search, the simplest way to think of Boolean search is to say, I want to include all the pages that contain A, for example, and that contain references to page B, but do not contain any reference to page C. So we'll have a look at a few, and then we'll basically start building some stuff. And I want to show you how I normally write queries. So I go from very broad to simple. So you have, and in this case, I want to see all the pages or all the blocks that both contain Alice and Bob. So it will not include pages that only mention Alice but not Bob. It will only, sorry, did I say? I think I said it wrong. So it will only include pages that both contain Alice and Bob. So it will not contain pages that only mention Alice or only mention Bob. So that is one example. Then you have or. So even if, so in this case, if only Alice is mentioned but not Bob, that result will still appear in the query results. Why is that? Because it's or. So it's either Alice or Bob has to appear in the search results. Then there's also not. So in this case, I want to see every result, so every block that it contains Bob, but not Alice. So if we look at the previous queries here you got three results. Here we got 6 results with the or argument or filter. And in this case, there's only one block or one branch that contains only Bob. In all the other blocks, Bob always is, I would say, accompanied by Alice. So Alice is always mentioned, except for in this branch. And I say branch because a query doesn't just look at block level, because if you can see here it will fetch all the blocks. Let's see, sorry. Yeah, it will basically look in the branch, but we'll see in it a little bit what that exactly means. So queries don't just work on one single block. They also work on, they also check the entire branch. So what other blocks are in the parent-child relationship? I hope that makes sense. And then there's between, which we'll be looking at in very shortly. There's property, which we'll also be looking at. And then if there's time, we'll have a look at to do. The easiest way to just show this is by creating something live, because I think an example will help way better than just talking abstractly. So let's create a branch, simple branch. I have a journal and I'm going to make this a branch. So I'm going to add some text, some more text, and I felt sad. Oh, sad. All right. So what I've just created is a branch with 2 links in it. So the parent block contains a link, journal, and the child block, the last child block, sad, also contains a link. And let me just write a very simple query based on this. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to write a query that contains both the keyword journal and the keyword sad. So I'm going to use the end filter, and I want to see all the journal entries that have the keyword sad in it. I click out of it, and here you see basically the entire branch. So I should be able, oh, that I should have not done. Yeah, all right. So basically here I can click into the whole branch, so I can see where this comes from. In the query itself, and I might be confusing a few people, but in the query itself, you see the result. So the end result, so the last block that matches both these filters. So I want to see journal. So any block that has journal and sad, what has both of these values is the last block, because in the last block, I've added sad. But why does it also look for journal? Because journal is part of the branch. So that's how it works. As you can see here, I can see the entire branch. So you have the block I felt sad, some more text, add some text. But what happens if I unindent this block? So I add some text and some more text, I make them siblings. Do that. And then, as you'll see, the query updates. So in this case, the branch is I felt sad, some more text, and journal. Add some text, I should say block 2, and then block, I think this is easier, block 3. So block 2 is no longer part of this branch. Block 3 is part of the branch because it has this child block that is tagged with sad. If I hit tab again, block 3 and block 2 becomes part of the branch. And as you will see here, the query will update. All right, so that is the most basic form. So this is why it's so important to indent, because if you don't properly indent, so if you say, I felt sad, and I say, because of John treating me badly. All right, so here you'll see it will update. But what happens? I want to see all the instances that I was sad because of John. So update the query, add John as an argument. The query will still be the same. Well, it updates a little bit. So I felt sad because of John treating me badly. Why is this so important? Well, if I put everything on the same level, you'll see there's a lot of context missing something. So I want to have the context, and that's why I use indentation. All right, let's build some proper journal query. And I've already set up some data, and we'll use some filters. For now, I want to basically build a query from scratch, but step by step. So I want to show you a process of how to write a query, but not having to juggle too many things at once in your mind. So you start from very broad. So basically you grab a lot of data, and then you start to slice and dice, as it's called in data analysis. So in the same way, you would basically slice and dice your nodes. So we want to get started with just fetching all blocks between 2 dates. So how would I go over it personally? Personally, I would write down the steps. So I want to write down all the steps that I need. So it's basically pseudocode to get to a desired result. So I write, I want to fetch all blocks between April 1st and today. And then the second step, I'm thinking, okay, now I've fetched all those blocks between April 1st and today. What type of blocks do I want to, or what type of branches do I want to fetch? I want to fetch all journal entries. I'm like, okay, not just journal entries, fetch all morning journal entries. And then finally, I want to see, let's get started with this, and then we can dig deeper later. All right. So first, I want to fetch all blocks between April 1st and today. So what would be the starting point? Well, starting point is start with a query shortcode. But what will I write here? That's the question. So I go to the documentation, and I'm already here. That's coincidence, but I will have to use the between. But basically, you can search with dates, or you can just search for relative dates. So there, as it says here, there are several built-in symbols. I can put in today, yesterday, tomorrow, now. I can add a number, and then the Y is for year, I think. Yeah, M is for month, week, day, hour, minutes. So I can basically drill down, which is what is not mentioned here. I can also just put in absolute dates, which is what we're going to do right now. So I want to fetch everything that's between. So I'm going to open a bracket for between to signal to the query. This is a filter. So filter is enclosed by parentheses. To make it a little bit easier to read, I will put a space here. So I'm going to look for everything between April 1st. So I will just write /dates, open the date picker, and select April 1st. And the second value I have to put in is the end date. So I'm going to just write today, because I want to fetch all the blocks between April 1st and April 6th, what it is today. I click out of the block, and you'll see here I get 6 results, because what it does is it looks for all the blocks that are meeting this this filter. So here you see basically the daily page of every with all the blocks. So here you see the office hours. I don't want that. I don't want to see this branch or block. I want to see all journal entries. So how do I do that? So the easiest way to do this is, well, at least I know I can fetch all the blocks between 2 dates. So that works. This is also a very good principle in programming. So you start with very simple functionality, and then you build it more and more complex. But in the meanwhile, you test, you see if it works. You don't build a whole solution at once, and then hopefully it works. No, you build it in little parts, in the same way we do with queries. So now I'm going to copy and paste this query, and I want to add an argument. So I don't just want to see all the blocks that are between 2 dates. I want to see all the blocks that are also tagged with journal. So how do I do this? Remember that the filters or queries basically work like mathematical functions. So what I will do now, what you will see now, I will put another parentheses around this, and I will add the AND filter. So, okay, what is now going to happen? And by the way, I should add journal as a value. So what's now going to happen? First, Logseq, when running this query, is going to filter or fetch all the blocks that meet this condition, because it's the innermost function. It's the innermost operation. So first, it will fetch all the blocks between April 1st and today. Once it has caught or found those blocks, it doesn't display them yet, because there's another filter. It's the outer parentheses that it will then look at, and that says, and it also has to contain the link to journals, to journal. So in this case, if I click out of the block, we go from 6 results to 5. Why is that? Because now this block doesn't appear. Why not? Because it doesn't have the link journal. All right. So we've already drilled down a little bit. Now we'll take this query again, and I want to fetch all morning journal entries. How would we do that? Well, there are 2 ways, because there are actually only 2 types of journals I have currently in this graph: morning journal and evening journal. Because if we look here, we have a morning journal and we have an evening journal. I could basically approach this 2 ways. I can say I want to see all the morning journal, all the blocks that have, first of all, are created. No, I'm saying that wrong. That are on the journals page of the journals pages between April 1st and April 6th. So that's the first requirement it needs to meet. Then it must contain the link journal, but I can just add another value to this and just say morning. It also needs to contain morning. If I only have two values, I can say, oh, I want to see all journal entries except for the evening journal. That is also something I can say. So instead of and, I would add a filter that says not evening. But in this case, we'll keep it simple. And as you'll see here, we drop from 5 results to 3 results. So that is basically how I normally approach writing queries. So I start with a single filter and I see, okay, does this work? Do I see some blocks that I expect to get? And then I start to dig deeper and become more specific by adding filters and adding basically search arguments. Someone is asking what happens if you have your config set up with a different date format. So for example, year, month, date, it will work the same way. The only thing that will change is basically your links. But if you do it the same way I did it, so you just use the date picker, it will work. If at some point you change your date format and you have set up queries like this, just make sure that you reindex, because then it will basically transform all the links to the proper new date. So it works the same way. Actually, what you have, I work with the same format in my personal graph, works the same way. So yeah, nothing that would change. Let's play a little bit with properties. So what is a property? A property is basically a piece of metadata. So as you can see here, this is one block. And in that block, I have added these words with double colons after. That this basically indicates a key value pair. So if you're in any way familiar with databases, this is an example of that. So I have the key time, and then the value is morning in this case. I have another key value pair. So basically the property in this case, or the properties in this case, are time and mood. And then the values of those properties in this case are sad and morning. So let's say I want to only see the times that I was sad in the morning. So let's grab this pseudocode, fetch all morning journal entries that I was sad. All right. And then, just for some extra practice, let's just start from scratch so you can see again my process. So what do I want to do? First, I want to fetch all the blocks between April, a little bit small, doesn't matter, April 1st and today. All right, still works. And then not only that, but it also needs to be a journal entry tagged with morning. And now we're going to use a different filter called property. So I will open a new parentheses. And before we dive into this, let's just have a look at property. All right. So property, how does it work? Again, this could use some way more context, but for now, I'll just explain it. So first, I tell Logseq, I want you to also look for properties. So I will indicate this. You need to look for properties. Then I input the property I want to look for. So this is the key I want to put in, and then what value I want to look for. So in this case, the query is looking for every block that has a property called type and that has the value book as type. So we can see here, all these blocks have the property type, and then here the value book. And we can do something similar. So I will put in, I want to see the property mood. And every time the property mood has the value sad, you'll see it will only have 2 results. So that is how you work with properties. This looks like a whole, like a long string, like, oh, what am I looking at? But I hope that by breaking down a query, and again, starting from a big box of data. So we started with what, 11 blocks, and we've drilled down to 2. And this is really how I recommend you approach queries. And it helps to look at branches and basically predict, will this be in a query or not? So I don't recommend queries to randomly look through your data. For that, the search function is way more suited. What we want to do is build some processes using this. So in a bit, I will switch to my personal graph. Hopefully I will be able to open it because I'm on a new machine, but then we'll see how I have set up a small content creation pipeline. I've showed this before, but I think people wanted to dig a little bit deeper into that. So I'll do that. I have a few templates set up with some links. Why do I do that? Because these links feed into my queries, and my queries basically are how I manage different processes. So in this case, I have 2 templates set up. Now, if we open it, this is a to-do. So when I run this template, it will create a to-do with the link resource for area/thinkstack club. So that is the basic metadata. How I use this particular template is I run it on my journals page, and anytime I run that template, it will show up in this query. So this is the simplest way that I use queries, as an inbox. So just like you have your linked references at the end of the page, so I can go to, for example, to resource here, and then you'll see there are 86 linked references. And if I open it, which will take a while, but then you'll see it's not very precise. So let's see, are there resources that I have not? Yeah, so here I have a resource for learning Italian. It has nothing to do with, how do you say it, with the newsletter. So that is why I don't use the linked references for this, because I want to have more specific results. I only want to see the results that have use for me. So that's how I use it. If we look at the query, it's a very simple query. It's just it just has the and filter. So it looks for all the blocks that have resource as a link, area /thinkstack club as a link, that have the property to do in the status to do, and that is not a template. And why do I have this last part? Because when I'm looking through my resources, I don't want the template itself to show up. So I filter it out with the not filter. And then I just click outside of it. And this is basically how I check my resources that I want to link to. So that is the simplest way. If I have used a resource, I'll just click this checkbox, so it will become done, and as you see, it just disappears. I'll undo that for now, but that is basically how I run the query. So as soon as the query, or as soon as a block does no longer meet the query requirements, so again, I will do this again. This block I've added to my inbox on 4/4/2022, but it's now in the to-do phase, and I click it, then under the hood, it becomes done, and immediately it disappears from the query. So this is, I would say, the most basic way to use queries as an inbox. So you can use it in combination with templates. as you've seen in this overview of my templates, I also have a template for content ideas. Again, for areas as things like club. And it's how I very quickly can collect ideas. And I've set this up under my content pipeline. So I just have a few parent blocks set up with underneath the queries. So here I have my ideas, and that has a very simple query setup. I want to fetch all the blocks that contain content, idea, and areas slash things like club. In this case, I'm not looking for to-dos because, well, I will use these later. So what happens when I change the status? Well, it will go down in my pipeline. So here I have another query setup that looks for content that is in the status research. So if I change this from, let's see, from idea to research, it will disappear from this query, but it will show up in this query. So again, this is the most basic way of using queries. With these building blocks, you can basically start to think about way more complex workflows. So maybe you have a template for meetings, and in that template, you have a property setup for the project or attendees or the clients you're working for. And that way you can create overview pages. And as you can see, just using parent and child blocks to filter out stuff, you can very quickly create dashboards. So it's basically, you want to look for all the meeting notes between a specific date that is connected to a specific client. It's very easy to set it up. All you need is to think through some of the basic data structure. So maybe you want to think about some metadata, so properties that you want to add. Maybe you just want to use links. It's very versatile, but as you can see on the documentation page, there are many different ways to reach the same. So I could just use page links and not properties. But if we go back to the graph, there's one important advantage of properties, which I forgot to show, because when you see a query, you see this little toggle on top, and it says table view. Well, the table view works based on the page, or sorry, not a page, any property, so page or block properties. So when you use properties, you can basically create tables this way. So it makes it way easier to go through your notes or through blocks that meet a certain criteria. All right, I see we're almost up on the hour. Has been a lot of me rambling. Let's see if there are questions. Blake is asking, are there any ways to have state lists, like your ideas, research, next value 2, so that you can cycle from state to state in the list without typing as much? Okay, the answer is currently no, but if we look at a to-do, let's see, to-do, this is a task. If I click on to do, you'll see it will go into the status doing. Actually, I can filter on this. So I can say, I want to fetch all the queries, sorry, all the blocks that have a to do in the status doing. And then you'll see, oh, there are actually 2. So there are 2 in the status. So the plan is, it's not accepted yet, but there is a suggestion to enable users at their own statuses to, in this case, tasks, to add your own statuses. So that is one approach we're exploring. Another approach is what we are exploring is basically that you would have a block, and then this like time, morning, or evening, and then when you click out of it, it would basically turn into a drop down. So we're now looking into, okay, is there a way we can add some drop down with previously used values to the page properties or block properties. So I keep saying page properties, but it's just properties because you're going to assign them to blocks or to pages. But yeah, we're actually exploring some ways to make this easier. Which way we'll go, not sure yet, because, well, we have some other stuff that we want to cover first. So like sync and real-time collaboration. Good question. So yeah, it's definitely something we want to refine over time. As he is asking, if I have some block text, what is the preferred way? Add a tag in the beginning, in the end, or in the child block? So if like, it doesn't matter where the tag is in the block, because it will just look for the entire block. As we've seen in the example that I was showing before with a branch, you want to put in the tag from the block that you want to show up. So even though it shows the entire branch, you want to basically retrieve the block itself. So I can just put in journal, and then it will fetch all journal entries. And then, but it doesn't really matter the order that you put it in the query, because it will just look for all the blocks, and then it will show the last matching block. So if you have the tag in a child block, it will show the child block. It will not show the parent block that also makes it match. So it will really show the last block in the branch. I hope that makes some sense. I will use a few minutes to show you something that will hopefully help you get more out of Logseq. So the documentation definitely needs some work. We need to add more examples, more context, more in-depth explanations. We're working on that. In the meanwhile, we are really relying also on our community. So this is the community hub. It still needs a little bit of work. There are some unused categories, but this will basically be the way to find content about Logseq. So I've put the link in the chat. It's hub.logseq.com. And I am currently, personally, if you want to volunteer and help me, I would be eternally grateful. But not currently, I'm doing this all myself, and I am adding different videos mostly, and a little bit of context from those videos. So for example, here I have collected a few daily workflows. I have a little blurb about the video. I embed the video, and then I am so crazy that I take screenshots of some parts of the video that will give you a good impression of, oh, how is this person using Logseq? This is the community hub. It's a collection of resources created by the community. I go on YouTube, I search for it. I go on Google, I search for Logseq tutorial, etc., etc. If you want to help me out, so if you create a resource, so if you create a video, write an article, have some neat templates, whatever, just fill out this form and you will help me a lot. So that is that. Let's see. Here it is. So this is basically how I want a page to be. You have a little blurb, video description, the timestamps, which I get from either a comment or with the video or the creator itself. I create some screenshots. And why I do that is, well, this way you can very quickly scan the video and see, oh, is this for me? Do I want to hear more about this or not? So personally, I really like that to have. And then these are the links mentioned in the in this video, and these, in this case, they are specific videos that I'll link to. So this is the basic structure of the community hub. If you want to help me out, just fill in this form. So article, video, course, other. Feel free again to add your own stuff. So let's just run through it. So in this case, Logseq, do you have a suggestion for the description? If you don't, fine, because I normally watch the video or read the article and I write a little blurb like this myself. Very time consuming, but I just think it helps to pick and choose what content you want to consume. You have other content comments, and then your email address. Please leave it if you want me to get back to you once I've published it. So, for example, if you're a creator, get in contact with me and supply me with your content. I'm I would happily promote your content. Oh. All right. Let's see. I see some more questions. So any advantage of to use a property tag besides the advantage of a table column? If you ask me, the table column is basically the main advantage of using properties over just links. But properties will hopefully in the future will have some either a plugin or core functionality that will enable you to basically export those tables, because 2 weeks ago we had Workflow Wednesday with Kara Antonacchio, and basically the idea popped up with some people. It's like, hey, you can basically create your own semantic database this way. So it would be nice if there would be some way to export that. So if you're a plugin developer and you're watching this and you think I could create that, please do. If you have some export for like some idea to export the properties, that will be useful. But at the moment, I cannot see a reason over it. Yeah, but for metadata, because you can also just dedicate the first block of a page to this metadata, to properties, but then they are called page properties, and then they will apply to the entire page. The way I've showed them now, they apply to a branch because they are block properties in that case. There are many things possible with the idea of properties that we have not implemented yet. So like drop-down lists or export, hopefully we'll put that in place soon. If you found this super confusing, please let me know. And what would help me a lot is if you say where I lost you. So where in the session I lost you. Obviously I will be editing this recording. I'll be putting it up to YouTube. Everyone who registered will get a link to the recording. So rewatch the recording if you found parts confusing. If you still then think things are confusing, just leave a YouTube comment. That will help me a lot to make these sessions better. But also, this is a way for us to learn about what functionality you are missing in the product. So what are some things that you've seen today that you think, hey, it would be nice if I could do this? So one example is the drop down or the pick list for values for properties. That's a great idea. The export is an idea we heard earlier. So yeah, but overall, especially my explanations with queries, I need to refine them because I've noticed it's a tough concept. If you're not used to programming in any way, if you are very used to point and click interfaces, this can trip you up. So that is also feedback we've heard. And another thing we are now looking into, would it be useful if we have some kind of visual UI user interface for queries? So we now already have a tool that you can run it on your command line. Like that's the other spectrum of for the super technical people who run stuff in their command lines. Now we are looking at the other end of the spectrum where people are not used to typing stuff or typing their search terms in a sense what to point and click. That is also something we're looking into. So sorting within queries is not supported yet. Is that correct? There's a sort by filter. So you can definitely add a sort by, but it's not point and click. So it's not. So in this case, You can, for example, use created at, updated at. This is far from complete, so I'm a little bit hesitant to show this because obviously it's missing a lot of context. It's missing an explanation. But if you do understand how it works, if you've been experimenting with it and you think, hey, like it works like this, send me a message and help me out with the documentation, because it's a mammoth task to rewrite documentation. Okay, that was the last question. So sorting is possible, but it's experiment. Well, you have to experiment with it because it's not well documented. So I don't want to dive too deep into it. If there are no more questions, I am going to stop the recording and then wish you all a great day wherever you are. For me, it's evening, so I'm going to get some dinner and then chip away at the community hub some more, because I need more to add way more resources. So I want to thank you. And if you have ideas for future Workflow Wednesdays, if you think I have a kick-ass workflow to show people that you want to inspire, or maybe you want to get some help with the workflow. So you already have a part of your workflow fleshed out, but you want to refine it and you need some help with it, let's organize a Workflow Wednesday together. And I've already done 3 so far with other people. So with Aryan Sani, he showed how to build a Logseq plugin. With Cara Antonacchio about her research workflow in Logseq. They're all on the Logseq YouTube channel. And then last week, I had a session with Dario da Silva, who runs When Stuttering Mind, the YouTube channel, and we talked about workflow design. That was a more free-flowing conversation. It depends per week. And this time it was a presentation basically on queries. All right, a lot of talking. I need a rest. Thank you all. And I hope to see you in a future session. Bye all.